everybody, this is Kendall, and this is my prompt 2 video. Excuse my nasalness, I've got a cold going on. So, for question 1 on prompt 2, it was to go through the resources that were provided for us, the articles, and I chose the toolkit one, and this one was about Gibbs' reflective cycle, and this was probably my favorite one. It was the easiest for me to understand personally. So I used that, and I reflected on my original lesson that I taught, and the role reflection plays in my own instructional practice. It's by how every lesson that I teach, I think about what I could have done differently to help my students better understand the content after I've taught it. I also think about different approaches I could take the next time that I teach it, based on the previous time I did. And as a first year teacher, I always reflect a lot on my instructional practices, and because I'm trying to figure out the best way to be able to teach my students, but also trying to find my own personal style of teaching. How do I utilize peer experts in becoming a better teacher? I do this a lot. So I utilize my peer experts by asking questions about the content and what was the best way they found to present the information to their students from previous experiences in their years of teaching. They've helped me a lot this year with this, being my first year. I come to them with different scenarios I have of different level learners, behavior issues, or just general questions about teaching. And they're very, very, very willing and very helpful to share their knowledge and trying to help me out. So, in what capacity does my prior knowledge and student experience influence my own growth as a teacher? By how my classes I've taken in my undergraduate and graduate programs, they've provided me with some good resources to refer to. My past student experiences have influenced me as a teacher because I struggled with certain things in school, and I figured out ways that best work for me, and I try to implement these with my students. And there's my reference page for the toolkit. Question 2, I used the toolkit. This was the format that they used when they reflected on lessons. So I'm using a shapes lesson that I did in ECED 7259. So the describe part, this lesson was about the different ways students can determine whether a shape is 2D. They will learn attributes for each shape. It was more of a lecture along with a question and answer portion the first time I taught it. The feelings, I had mixed feelings about this lesson. I felt it was successful for most of my students, but some of my students I felt did not pay attention and get what they needed to from this lesson. Evaluation part. The lesson itself was a little chaotic because it was more of a lecture than it was an interactive component. My students did not do as well with this lesson because of this. Analysis of it. I could teach this lesson in a more hands-on way to help my students be more engaged and learn more. Conclusion I drew. I learned my students are not the type of learners that can learn well from lectures. There's more of a hands-on type learners. My action plan, I will recreate this lesson in a more hands-on way to make it more fun for my students. And there's the reflection toolkit reference page again. Question 3, about my shapes lesson. So, how successful was I at addressing all learners in my classroom? To be honest, I don't think I was very successful at addressing all learners in my classroom with the lesson originally. After this lesson, I realized based on my test scores that some of my lower students did not get a single thing from my lesson, but my middle and high level learners excelled with this lesson. What strategies worked and did not work within the lesson in my instructional time? It was good for whole group instruction lesson, but the style I taught it lecturing was not the best choice for every student in my class. Having visual examples was helpful for my students, but if it was more hands-on, it would have been more engaging. How did my strategies for integration work within the lesson? What changes would I make to ensure multiple good content areas were covered more successfully? So originally I only did math. I didn't have another subject area. A change I would make to make sure I did more content areas would be to create a writing extension to go along with the math standard we are learning. This not only helps the students understand the math content, but better helps them with their writing skills as well. So revisions, I revised my lesson that I had previously taught, and I changed it to be a bingo game to reinforce the shape attributes. I would call out a shape attribute such as place a counter on the shape that has 3 corners, and they would then put a counter on a triangle on their bingo board. We would do this till a student got bingo. After the bingo game was played, the students completed a what shape in my sheet. The sheet required students to pick a shape from their bingo board and write 3 clues that describe it so that someone could guess their shape they described. This could be done whole group, or I could have done it as small group as well. This would be the video of my lesson that I redid, and I'm not going to play it now, but I will link my slideshow for you to go back and watch it. Here's the what shape am I activity writing extension that they did. So like I said, they had to make 3 clues. Like my student here, she did, my shape has 6 sides. Her second clue, my shape has 6 corners. And then her third one, my shape is red, because on the paper it was red. So in real life it wouldn't be that, but for this case I let her do that. So she was describing a hexagon and she drew her best hexagon. This one, her shape has 3 sides, 3 corners, and it's two-dimensional. She was describing a triangle. What was successful in this lesson, and how did it vary from my previous lesson? So I believe the student engagement and inclusion of another subject area and my shape attribute and shape name recognition were successful in this lesson. My students were more engaged in this lesson when we learned in game form. They got to practice identifying the correct shape name attribute to the correct shape. They also got to use their writing skills to make the clues for someone to guess their shapes. I feel that my students were overall much more successful when I taught the lesson in this way, especially my more rambunctious ones. This lesson varied from my previous lesson because in this lesson, students were identifying the shape that the attribute went with themselves instead of a whole group discussion where only one person gets to answer. This way was more inclusive to the entire class, which I believe helped them grasp a better understanding of the concept, and this also included a second subject area to help extend their learning. How prevalent was cultural diversity and community engagement within your planning and presentation? Were you successful? And explain how you determined that success. Cultural diversity was prevalent in my planning and presentation by how my class is a very diverse class with students that are from different ethnicities. You can see my video, we have a variety of ethnicities in my classroom. I was successful in showing this in my video, I believe. Community engagement is something we do more as a school rather than as a class. We have spirit nights and fundraisers that promote community engagement. This video does not show the community engagement that my class participates in, such as the Can-a-thon and the fun run. I believe I was successful in this aspect. I determined this by the results of my video and what cultural diversity is in the world. What level of student engagement existed in both iterations, and how might you continue to alter this for future classes? So the first shapes lesson that I had previously taught, they're engaged at some points but lost interest very quickly. In the revised shape lesson, my students were more engaged because it was more hands-on learning experience than the lecture mini lesson that I originally did. I might continue to alter this lesson by making it digital for students to be able to practice individually or at home, maybe through a Bookit or a Kahoot possibly. Were there changes in student engagement? Did student learning change as a result of the revised lesson? Yes, there were changes in student engagement. Their learning did change in a positive way after I modified the lesson. I believe my students learn better through hands-on experiences this time around. They seem to have a stronger grasp on the concept versus the time I had taught the lesson before. Summary of the entire class learning experiences. My class overall understood this lesson much better and were more engaged compared to the last time that I taught the lesson. Students used their knowledge of shapes to complete the bingo game. This was also a teaching opportunity because this taught students not only the shape attributes but strengthened their listening skills and ways to describe an object to someone, which is going to help them in everyday life. Two successful students during this activity would be student H and student J. They shined out of all the students because they did the best job listening and using their knowledge they've learned to describe their chosen shape to someone, like on their What Shape Am I page. I could meet their needs better next time by letting them maybe turn and talk to a partner to see if they could guess each other's shapes. This would improve social skills along with reviewing shape attributes. Analyzing the student work samples. So I can make learning more integrated and inclusive for diverse learners by integrating a social studies standard into an extended writing activity, such as the students could write a story about a shape who meets a historical character we've learned about, such as Ruby Bridges or George Washington Carver. To differentiate this lesson, I could have my higher groups write the story and draw a picture. My middle group could write their story, and my lower group could draw a picture and label. With the What Shape in my sheet, I had my students complete. My higher students could complete all 3 clues. My middle group could create 2 clues, and my low group could create 1 clue. For the bingo shape game, my higher and middle groups would complete individually while my lower groups could work with a partner. So reflect upon my graduate experience and how it influenced my thinking and teaching style. So the courses that I took during my graduate experience were helpful in the aspect that I got to learn new things, and then I got to go and test them out in my classroom to see how things I'm learning work when I'm actually in the classroom in real life. This aspect made me successful as a teacher because I got to learn from my mistakes and learn how to make improvements to previous lessons I taught after I had time to reflect on things. This experience influenced my thinking and teaching style by how now I think about what I have learned throughout the program and the things that worked for me. I'll continue to use those in my classroom, and then the things that didn't work as well, I can not do those again and I can figure out how to modify them to work in my classroom. I am now more okay with making mistakes because I know I can fix them and still help my students reach their full potentials. A few classes that would have been very helpful to be as a teacher would be a class that teaches more about the tier system and MTSS information, a class that teaches you how to deal with different kinds of parents, and a class that goes more into depth about behavior management now, not just in general, like specific, scenarios that could happen. But yeah, thank you guys so much, and let me know what you guys think. Bye.